Hello, welcome to another episode of Drinking with Comics, New Comic Book Day and a Beer. I'm Sean, and before I get into this week's poll, got another beer from Black Horse Brewing in Clarksville, Tennessee for you. This is the Vanilla Cream Ale. So, there's that, I think it's Genesee is the cream ale that I've been familiar with from 2 decades of hanging out in Dayton, Ohio, off and on. My friend Larry there drinks it, a bunch of people drink it, and it sounds like a bad idea, but it's really good. And there's not really a lot of vanilla or cream elements to it. It just kind of softens it. This is a lot like that. I was a little skeptical. This came in that variety pack I mentioned 2 episodes back, and I was able to save this. There were three of them. It was not easy to save one because they are delicious and they go really fast. It's like the slightest hint of vanilla in a way that it doesn't even come off like vanilla. It just kind of smooths the edges of the ale. Not a lot of hops in this ale here. This is a 4.8% alcohol by volume, so it's really easy drinking. Yeah, I really like this beer. I don't know if they have this on tap there. I'll have to check the next time I go. I tend to stick with either, I mentioned last time, the Coal Miner Stout when it's cold, or they have a really good blonde. I forget what it's called. And they have a really good red, like one of my favorite red ales I've ever had. Barnstormer Red. I had 3 cans of that from this pack too, but those went really fast. So yeah, this is Black Horse Brewing, Vanilla Cream Ale. Now let's talk this week's comics. I didn't do last week, the New Comic Book Day and a Beer, because Mike Shin and I did the big Energon universe discussion. And I did not do the 4 weeks that I was in LA. So there's a couple things that I'm going to talk about the second issue of now that I never spoke on this show about the first issue. One of those was actually something I wasn't planning on picking up. This actually came out, I think, either right before or right after I came back from LA. This was the first issue of Ram V and Lawrence Campbell's The One Hand. This was just totally a last minute lark pickup, and I absolutely loved it. It's a neo noir set in, I think the year is 2873. So it's the future. It reminds me a lot of Blade Runner, and I think that was the thing in the solicitation description that caught my eye. So it has that futuristic sci-fi neo-noir, and it's perfect. It is like the right balance of everything. It's not overly cyberpunk or overly noir or whatever. It's a crime story. It follows a cop, Ari Nasser, who it's the day of his retirement after a long and fruitful career, known for catching the one hand killer 30 years before and then catching him again. I forget, 12 years or something after that. And so there was all this like it's a different guy. So it was the first guy, not the killer. And you get a little bit of that. And then meanwhile, now there's a new body and he doesn't retire. He's like, put my retirement slip to the bottom of your desk, chief, because this is my case. I'm going at this until it's over. It is just a gorgeous comic book. So Lawrence Campbell does the art, and Lee Lowridge, who worked a lot with, I feel like I'm most familiar with his work, I think, from some of the Remender stuff. I don't remember if it's Black Science or if it's Deadly Class or if it's both, or I know the name. And he works a lot, and you can see why the colors in this book. And man, really hats off to everybody, but Lawrence Campbell and Lee Lowridge, goddamn. There's elements of like the sci-fi neo-noir stuff that I also associate with Frank Miller with like Ronin and Dark Knight Returns. Man, it's just such a compelling story. And it ends with this bloody fingerprint at the crime scene and with Ari Nasser saying, I think the killer has a sixth finger. Right. And then, so when I bought this, I read this, I was so impressed. I went and looked online because I'm like, I didn't hear anything about this. And it turns out it's a limited series, But there's also concurrently another limited series. The first issue came out last week. I didn't get it until this week because Rick's was shorted, so they had to grab me one on the back end. But this is the Six Fingers. Now, this is Dan Waters and Sumit Kumar and Lee Lowridge again. And this is a book that tells another person's story parallel to Ari Nasser's. And it's really fucking good. If pressed, I'd have to say I like the tone of the one hand the best. But this is a perfect accompaniment. And I'll tell you what, too. I know from talking to multiple people, these were short ordered. I don't feel like Image maybe did the right amount of publicity for this. All I found online was an article linked to from image.com from October last year where they announced this at Comic-Con or one of the Comic-Cons or something. I don't know. And I mean, I literally had not heard anything about these. And so when I went to Rick's last week and I mentioned, like, oh, we didn't get it, we got shorted. And then one of the guys that works there, George, he's like, come to think of it, after the one hand came out, I had like 6 people call me the store that day and say, hey, can you put me down for the Six Fingers? So they weren't really even aware of this. And I feel like I've heard that in LA, friends that I know that picked up the one hand, they didn't get Six Fingers. This is short ordered across the board. So I'm hoping they do another print run. But if you can grab these, like if you like Neo Noir or any futuristic Blade Runner, like if you're a Blade Runner fan, I think you'll dig these, particularly the one hand. But it's very cool to have this other book telling this parallel story. So I gotta say, I don't know if there's like a name for this universe yet, right? These take place in a city called Neo Novina. There's no indication where it is on the map or anything like that. You don't get a lot about the world, little bits, but not really an overscope of what the world is in 2873 or whatever it is. So I don't even care if that comes. I'm just the boots on the ground story here is fantastic, and essentially it's a crime story, and it's very good. So first, before I go into this, I'm going to talk about the Resurrection of Magneto #2. But before I go into this, I got to say, last week, Rise of the Powers of X #2 came out, and I've previously, over the last couple months, really been falling out of love with what's going on with these X books right now in this fall of Krakoa. And this really cinched that. So I walked into Resurrection of Magneto #2 expecting to hate it because I didn't remember #1. I think it's because when I got back from LA, I had such a stack of comics that had amassed in my pull box that I just read through so many of them so quick. But Rise of the Powers of X, I don't know. I feel like it is all over the fucking place. There's all this stuff going on that still feels like those last 2 issues of Immortal X-Men that just seem like a bunch of gobbledygook. That's like the story's taking place in this way where they're compressing certain elements, but either it's because I'm not reading all of the titles that they put out, and I'm never going to. I mean, I haven't this far, and I've never felt like this before, so I don't feel like that's on me, right? I'm reading the core titles, everything written by Kieran Gillen. And I just, the data pages, the info pages that Hickman devised that have carried on through these, they're really cool. But like in this one, it's a double page spread and there's so much fucking information on it. And I just feel like it's become a crutch for these books. It really tells you so much without telling you a lot. My first crossover really was, I guess you could count Fall of the Mutants or the Mutant Massacre, but those weren't really crossovers so much, not on the scale that they happen now or started happening after Inferno. So to me, the original 88 Inferno was the first crossover event book that I read. And I feel like maybe the first of its kind on that scale. And I think that it's excellent. I've always thought that even the tie-in books, the Spider-Man, Daredevil, all of it's great. And then, as a kid, then I read like Executioner's Song and I don't know, whatever the one with Genosha was, I think Phalanx Covenant was the one that broke the X-Men for me back then in the 90s because it always became a thing where it's like it's dire straits until the last like 5 pages of the last issue of the crossover. And it's, oh wait, if you use your power with your power, then we'll do this, and then status quo is just reset, right? With minor changes. But I don't feel like that with this. With this, I feel like there's a lot of Grant Morrison in this. I feel like there's a lot of Grant Morrison, Kieran Gillen's writing anyway. I read The Wicked and Divine for probably the first, I don't know, couple years, and then just fell off. There's so many cool images in this Rise of the Powers of X #2. But again, I just feel like what the fuck is even happening? There's these spider sentinels, and there's a Nimrod, but it's not the Nimrod. And we're dealing with this Dominion that's now bargaining directly with Moira. And it feels like a fucking mess. So I walked into Resurrection of Magneto #2 expecting to not like it. I reread #1, and right away I remembered. So this is basically the next step in what was Sword and X-Men Red, both of which I love. And, this written by Al Ewing, and they're fucking fantastic. They're very verbose, so they're not easy or quick reads. That's no problem with me. I'm just saying. Luciano Vicuccio and is the artist, and David Curiel is the color artist. The art in these books is like, to me, premium Marvel art. Like everything about the layout, the art, the colors, everything. This is what these books should look like for what are the shit, $5.99 for each one of these. Well, for #1, $4.99 for #2. But with #1, I had forgot right away. We're following Storm, so she goes into death. But to do that, she goes to see a character I was not familiar with, Dr. Adam Brashear, and he's with, I guess it's pronounced Taia. And so this is a character a couple years ago, Ewing did a Defenders series, and I read it, and I absolutely loved it. It blew me away, and they introduced this character, Taia, I'm not even going to attempt to explain who she is or where she comes from. She's Galactus's mom. She's not as big as Galactus. That's all I can tell you. It's been a while since I read that series. Might be due for a reread because it was really good. But there was so much tarot and like mysticism woven through it, but in a really elegant way. Not as like this gobbledygook that was letting them smudge the edges of the plot. This ties right into that. So she goes to them to send her into the waiting room, which is the place between life and death that Wanda Maximoff made for mutants. I didn't know any of that until fairly recently. I didn't understand that that was part of the operating principle of the mutant resurrection. So the first one, it's her journey through these kind of symbolic elements of the universe and then outside the universe, and she deals directly with other dominions. There's a shot of these guys that look like, it almost looks like a Marvel's version of the Green Lantern Corps, but it was all done really, really well. Tarot influences throughout. You get a really awesome shot of Magneto as the Hanged Man. And just really, really worked for me. And then #2, I went right in reading #2. Outstanding, absolutely fantastic. And Magneto is in this, like steeped in this eternal misery, and he's surrounded by these walls with the names of everybody that either directly or indirectly he caused their death. And there's just thousands and thousands of names. Some you'll know, some that are just fodder for the pages. But again, the art blows me away, but also the story and what they're doing here with the characters, I thought was really, really interesting because it is metaphysical, but I don't feel like nothing's happening. And that's kind of the thing. Like, I feel like with Rise of the Powers of X, I feel like there's not really anything happening. There's stuff happening, but not really. So it's just, I don't know, maybe I hope I'm wrong. I hope the end result is great. But this really goes into Magneto. And again, I can't believe how much I love this character now. His redesign in this is gorgeous. And they even go, like at the beginning, they go back to, it's got to be Uncanny X-Men like 200 or 150, where Magneto has an island, right? And so they go into a flashback at the very beginning of #2 where it's him and Namor go down, and it's when he got this island and Namor helped. But yeah, really. So if nothing else, I mean, no matter what happens with the X-Men, I really hope Al Ewing like just write a fucking Storm and Magneto book, and I'd be super happy. Now let's go into just briefly because we did a whole episode about it last week. I'm gonna go Duke number three. So I actually reread Duke one and two for this because it had been a while, and this book is way better than I thought. Like I mentioned on that episode with Mike Shinnebarger that Mike likes Duke more than me, and I was way more about the Cobra Commander title. This book's great, and I just really wasn't giving it its due. And the great thing about the book is Mars. So we're really seeing before Cobra, like Mike and I talked about, like how are they going to end up with this army by the end of this Cobra Commander series if it's only 5 issues? And I'm wondering if it's just they're going to take Destro's forces and start with that and then add to them. And then in here we also have Major Blood, and he's got a group of dudes that are dressed like him. He calls them the Bloodhounds. I don't know if that's like also possibly fodder for Cobra soldiers, especially with what happens in this issue. But this was really cool, and it just yeah, Duke is a great book. I'm really enjoying that. Phantom Road 9. This book is I say it every time it comes out. It's fucking nuts. I have no way to understand where this is going. It gets weirder every fucking issue in the best possible way, and I'm just so in. It's so weird. Retains its grindhouse feeling, but for some reason, it reminds me of Tales from the Dark Side. I don't know why. It's been decades since I've watched a Tales from the Dark Side. Well, that's not exactly true, but it's been a long time since I watched one sober and not in the middle of the night. So I don't 100% remember anything I've watched since I was a kid. But there's just something about this, man. I don't know. It's like Twilight Zone-y, but Grindhouse. I don't. It's so good. And then Newburn. This is a penultimate issue, folks. One more, and this shit's going out with a bang. This is such a great high level crime comic from Chip Zdarsky and Jacob Phillips. Really going to be sad to see this one go. There's not much I can say about it. It's street level crime. It's intricate, great characters, and it's over next month. So that's really the pull for this week. Other than that, I did want to mention. So I there was a bunch of kind of freebies. There was an IDW catalog. So I don't know if they've just finally started this a lot like the Marvel and the DC Connect that come out, soliciting titles for further down the road. And seeing this, it made me go back and look. Now I talked about how Jason Aaron is taking over Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles after Sophie Campbell leaves, and I was unclear as to whether they were going to restart the continuity. They are not restarting the continuity. So I'm super fucking happy. I read an interview today where he talked directly about, like, just to be clear, it's a relaunch, but it is not a reboot, and we're sticking with where they are. And that's a good place to start because I'm telling you, I see so many interesting paths they can take with this. So I'm very, very happy. Marvel, everything now is about Blood Hunt. So I just could not be interested in that. I could not be less interested in that. I will say I was super happy. I realized like 5 minutes after I saw this, I still had a smile on my face. There's a new Garth Ennis Nick Fury series coming out, and fucking Jason Burrows is drawing it. Now, I don't know if Jason Burrows has ever drawn for Marvel before. To my knowledge, he has not. He may very well have. I have gaps in my Jason Burrows knowledge. But Jason Burrows really came to my attention working on stuff for Alan Moore and Garth Ennis back in the early 2000s. And I'm just so happy to see him doing this. I didn't think we'd see more Garth Ennis doing Nick Fury. Now, I don't know if this will be like the old Max title, because I know that was like, that ruffled some fucking feathers. There's a story I heard once, I won't say which famous writer told me this story, but that he was always careful about what he got involved in, because when that original Garth Ennis Nick Fury series was being done for the Max imprint, so this is like 2002 maybe, they were trying to get a Nick Fury movie off the ground, and they were courting George Clooney. And George Clooney walked into a comic shop and picked up an issue of this Garth Ennis Nick Fury book, read it and was like, no, because it's pretty fucking crass. So I don't know. I don't know what to expect, but I will definitely be buying that. So that's Drinking with Comics. I'm Sean. I'm going to get back to my vanilla cream ale. Hi, I'm Sean. Join me and my friends every week for the Horror Vision, where we talk about horror movies.